All right, everyone. Welcome back to another great episode Beneath the Helmet. I'm your host, Arjuna George, former fire chief, now podcaster and coach, as well as the author of Burnt Around the Edges. And if you haven't checked it out, be sure to download or buy your own copy at Amazon or burntaroundtheedges.com. All right, today we got a chance to sit down and talk everything mindfulness. We have a chance to connect with Josh Grandinetti. Through our conversation today, we're going to explore the differences between mindfulness, meditation, what the differences are there, how one can start a mindfulness practice, the benefits around mindfulness, especially as first responders. We're going to talk about some of the challenges that we face and how we can use mindfulness to be more resilient first responders. We also get a real treat where Josh is going to take us through just a real short guided mindfulness journey, just for about 3 minutes long. We're going to talk about the first responder loop and how that impacts our mental health on a day-to-day basis. We're going to talk about how we can bring mindfulness to the fire station and do it right in our fire station, which is also pretty awesome. And Josh has just recently launched Foundation Fortified. Foundation Fortified is his business that is going to bring mindfulness to the fire service through education, knowledge, through a platform that he's developing. So I hope you enjoy this great episode and conversation with Josh. Hopefully it inspired you like he did to me about taking mindfulness a little bit more seriously and paying a little bit more attention to the present moment. I know I do it when I'm podcasting and when I'm coaching. I'm very mindful of who I'm talking to, and nothing else matters in the world. It's strictly just the person on the other side of the screen or the other side of the microphone. And I just want to bring a little bit more mindfulness into the rest of my life through different avenues. And the conversation with Josh today definitely helped me, motivated me to just spend a little bit more time and concentration on being more mindful in my day-to-day stuff. So enjoy this episode. Until next time, stay well.
It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired fire chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
Another great episode, Beneath the Helmet. We are looking at season 2 here, and I'm joined with Josh Grandinetti. So welcome to the show, Josh. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
So tell our listeners today a little bit about who Josh is and kind of where you came from and what brought you to where you are today.
Well, my name is Josh Grandinetti, right? I'm born and raised in Arizona, so I'm 35 years old, and I've been married for about 15 years, okay? And I've got a boy who's 11 years old, and I got another one that's 9.
Awesome.
I've been a captain for 5 years in a 15-year career in the fire service, and I've been a paramedic of 12 of those years. So that's kind of, I work currently at Eloy Fire District. It's a small town here in Arizona. If you're familiar with Eloy in any way, most of your listeners will know them through skydiving. Eloy is the world center for falling people out of the sky. So,
there you go.
Yes, sir.
Never tried that. Have you done it yourself?
Neither have I. Neither have I. Yeah. I've seen the times when it doesn't go well being a firefighter out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. My daughter did in Australia, but I've never had the urge to do it. So Josh, I know a lot of your passion revolves around mindfulness and how that's impacted your life so much. I kind of want to start the conversation off with, how did you find mindfulness to start with? What was your journey there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I began meditating as a personal journey about 8 years ago. Okay. I had come to a place in my career where I was just kind of getting a little stressed out and wanted to give this mindfulness thing a try that I saw in some, district email I got one day. Right. But the problem was there was nowhere to start. We're all kind of told as first responders to give meditation a try, but where do you go? So I spent the first couple of years of my meditation practice kind of wading through a lot of religious dogma, showing up to different meetings with different principles and different teachings, and all the nonsense and all the silliness that comes with that ancient practice. But I did begin to notice that there was something here to take from as a first responder and as a human, right? Um, I remember this one particular session where I was at, and it was a gong session. Okay, so I showed up and I bowed my head, and a couple minutes in, began to ring gong every so often. And I would just have this reaction that the other bowed heads around me wouldn't have. And I just couldn't escape it. And it blew me away that no matter how much I knew this gong was going to come, it still made me jump. Remind me of being at the station a little bit. So I returned again and again and just began to notice over time my physiological and emotional response to that gong and to the tones in my station just seemed to diminish slightly. So instead of having to calm myself down when I hear disruptive or loud noise or a tone, I could just respond in the most streamlined way to whatever the tone was or whatever was happening around me, right? I didn't have to have the background data of the mind that was disrupting me at all times. And in many, many other, ways that the practice can influence my life and my career. But a recent injury has allowed me a little bit of time. The idea for Foundation Fortified kind of started a couple years after my practice. But like many busy first responders, our projects kind of sit for a little while. And a recent injury at work has kind of given me the time to become certified as a mindfulness instructor through the IMMA, and then bring Foundation Fortified forward and produce some content for first responders.
So tell us a little bit about that process of going through the certification. What was that like?
It was really fun. It was really fun. There's definitely a difference, in being somebody with your head bowed and just focusing on your own practice, and then trying to walk somebody through a very strange practice, a very difficult way of getting through some of these concepts. It can be difficult on the teaching side of that scale, right? But I love it. I love doing it. I love being able to blend the mindfulness with first responder struggles and first responder needs. The course itself was really illuminating because it allowed me, obviously, the time to understand how to train an individual from first principles into understanding the practice, what the goals are, and what we're trying to do here, right? And then having my understanding as a first responder in the background has really been able to bring some things forward that I think can really be beneficial to us all. But time will tell. Time will tell.
So this is all fairly new in your life. This transformation.
Yes, it's fairly new. Fairly new. I think I became an instructor in March. I finally got my certification and everything there, and I began producing content on my Facebook and Instagram and YouTube page about 5 months ago. Just like any new creator, you kind of get better pretty quickly, So here in November, actually, I'm going to be deconstructing my website, and we're going to be putting a brand new, what I like to call a mindfulness task book out there onto our website for listeners to go. And there's going to be a free section for sure, because I fundamentally believe that every first responder should at least understand this practice, separated from all the religious dogmatism. We're all told to seek mindfulness or meditation when we feel anxiety, stress, depression, as ways of coping, as ways of preventing, but nobody knows how to do it or where to go or how to start as a first responder. So what I aim to do is produce a 10 to 12 course session that's for free for any first responder or organization to be able to give their people to say, here, we've told you, here's a guy who can show you. And then beyond that, I'll have subscriber content where if you want to take your mindfulness practice deeper, that's kind of where I'm interviewing to be your own, mindfulness instructor. But as a believer in mindfulness practice, I'm trying to produce something for first responders that they can at least dive in, give it a shot, and see if it's for them. So
beautiful, awesome. What did Josh learn about himself going through this journey of mindfulness? What kind of came to light for you?
Well, early on, I think my practice centered around the same thing many listeners will discover or have discovered if they've ever tried it. I got a busy mind. I got a busy mind, and that mind is constantly keeping me somewhat dissatisfied with my experience, right? The mind has two jobs, really. The mind keeps us safe, and it keeps us ever so slightly dissatisfied with our current experience, right? This is why when we get that promotion, or we have our firstborn, or we get married, we feel on top of the world, like we're never going to need. I remember my first check from the fire service was $1,100. I was never going to worry about money again, right? But as soon as we get these accomplishments, they begin slipping away from us as fast as we got them,
Mm-hmm.
because the mind keeps you slightly dissatisfied as a heuristic evolutionary shorthand for motivation, right? If you're dissatisfied with your current experience, it's slightly motivating to go change that experience. So I first began to notice this subtle dissatisfaction my mind constantly was feeding me about my experience, and I couldn't fix it. The very nature in trying to fix it is just maintaining that hamster on the wheel, right? But mindfulness gave me a chance to just sit and notice that my mind wants me to be dissatisfied, and I really don't have any reason to be dissatisfied. I'm in a great country and a great state. My basic needs are taken care of, and many of my essential wants are managed, right? I have very few things that I need in my life, maybe nothing at all that needs to be provided for me at this point. But many of us feel as if there are so many things we need to be happy. We still need to be constantly seeking that next achievement to be happy. And so mindfulness first began to teach me that. And beyond that, I've learned what a little anxious creature I am. I tend to be a very anxious little person. And there's this constant moving in here in the back of my mind that always wants me to be changing something, always wants me to be influencing something. I think that's what makes me the first responder I am, right? But there's an ugly side to that coin as well. And that's the ugly side that keeps you engaged in your thoughts, engaged in your desires, engaged in the ways you want to influence your life. They keep you from seeing just how good you have it and seeing just how nice each moment can be if you just pay close enough attention. So those are some of the things I've
Yeah, love it. So for the listener right now who's listening, going mindfulness, I've heard of it. Don't really know what it exactly is. How would you describe mindfulness? And then also maybe on the same side, how would you kind of report that back of how it's different than meditation itself?
Great. I love that question. So the way I've described it is a mindfulness meditation practice is no different than having a gym practice. Okay. All we're doing in the gym is going into a room or an environment to try to stress certain parts of our body, right? And that stress is good for us. Okay. Whereas the mind works in an opposite fashion. We're trying to reduce the mind stress during mindfulness practice, but that is the practice, right? And by returning to it each and every day, you get slightly less distractible toward your inner thoughts, feelings, and emotions. You become slightly less reactive, right, with every session. But mindfulness meditation is just like the gym, whereas the skill you're trying to practice is mindfulness. And mindfulness is the deployable skill that we want to have in our lives. Mindfulness, simply described, is just the ability to notice your moment to moment experience without distractions and without judgment, right? We're constantly judging our experience to be good or bad. Is the air in this room too hot or too cold? Is my coffee too stiff or too creamy, right? Like we're always applying these judgments to things. But it's possible to just be with what is, and not be constantly ethically judging every single thing to be right or wrong. And that's kind of the skill of mindfulness is being able to notice how the world is appearing to you, and not try to change it. And in doing so, you can respond to your life in the way that you actually want, right? I mean, if you happen to be if you happen to be angry because something happened to you, maybe you got hit by somebody, there's this moment where you're not frustrated, and then you get hit, and then you're influenced with all this anger. And we keep ourselves angry, right? By reminding ourselves of all the reasons this shouldn't have happened. Why did John hit me? We're friends. Well, now my face hurts, right? He shouldn't have hit me. I thought we were friends, and my face still hurts. And you just keep yourself on this train where the half life of any given emotion, like anger, frustration, pain, anxiety, are all very small. If you could just notice them arise, change in the mind, and then pass away. There's no need to identify with any negative state or emotion any more than you need to once you have a sufficient amount of mindfulness in your back pocket. So,
Interesting. What are some of the challenges that people kind of come across when exploring mindfulness? What are some of the obstacles that people face that you've maybe worked with trying to get to that practice, right?
Absolutely. Like I said earlier, just knowing where to start,
Mm,
knowing where to go, knowing, am I entering the Buddhist world or the Tibetan tradition? Am I, where am I going and how am I finding it? That's the first struggle. And I'm hoping for first responders, Foundation Fortified can be a good place they can start to
mhm,
discover it. But beyond that, most of the struggles with mindfulness are fairly predictable from the moment you start. The moment you start with your eyes closed and you're told to focus on the breath, right? Or focus on sounds, whatever it happens to be, you're immediately going to notice how unable you are to do this simple task. I mean, here you are, an adult, right? Trying to focus your mind on one thing, the breath.
mm,
And you'll be flying around like a superhero in the mind, or you'll be rehearsing some argument from yesterday or whatever. And you'll get frustrated, focus on the breath, and you get mad at yourself, and you begin to get annoyed with the practice. You begin to feel like there's nothing worth doing here. This is a waste of my time. Instead, I'm going to grab my phone and distract myself. But it's in that grabbing your phone, distracting yourself, you're also training your mind to be distracted, to not be still, to not rest, to not just notice how it's experiencing the world. I mean, if you want to understand your mind, you have to sit down and observe it, right? We none of us have access to MRI machines. We
mhm.
can't just go and check out the brain through different
Yet,
machines.
yet.
Yet. But mindfulness is a place to just go and experience your inner experience and how you relate to your world,
Mm,
right? There are a lot. Every mindfulness journey has its own struggle, right? Because you are your own person and you have your own things that you're going through. But certain hurdles throughout mindfulness practice are fairly predictable. Once you're able to maintain your attention for more than 20 or 30 seconds without losing attention, and get distracted with something. Once you're able to get that level of attention kind of honed in your practice, that's when you can kind of start to develop as an individual. You can start to notice, am I an anxious or depressed type person? Do I come back to practice day in and day out and am frustrated, or am I calm? How am I feeling? How much time do I spend on my mindfulness practice thinking about my children versus my job?
mm.
Once you get a sufficient amount of attention, you can actually begin to see the reality that your mind creates for you. And with enough practice, begin to kind of slow it down, begin to kind of influence it in ways that you want to live your life, not your mind trying to live your life through you. Does this make sense in any way?
For sure. It's one of the toughest things to do, though, isn't it?
No, it's very, very difficult. Very difficult.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm an expert or even a novice mindfulness person, but I definitely include that in my life on a regular basis. Maybe I am, stronger than I think in the mindfulness act, but I don't think I'm where you are right now. That's for sure. But yeah, it's a challenge to keep that brain kind of coming back to just thinking about it, right? So I've
And
talked to
it's
my
true.
my my dad did a lot of meditation through his life, and he always said that it's a practice. And what do we
Mm,
do for practice? We keep working on it, right? It's
that's
not
right.
not
That's
something that
right.
just happens once and you're done, right? So
But there is more to say. It's just like any other discipline or endeavor we're trying to do in our lives. Okay, mindfulness is its own struggle, and I'll get to that in a minute. Okay, but think about picking up golf or picking up shooting or being a first responder to the degree whatever discipline you are. There's a lot of training in
mhm,
time and skills you have to obtain in order to finally be able to enjoy the golf course, right?
mhm,
Or to be able to enjoy whatever skill you're trying to hone. I mean, there is an intrinsic pleasure in working out at the gym, right? At first, you go to the gym and you wake up the next morning and you just cannot believe you're in so much physical pain. But after you go back several months in a row, you begin to kind of enjoy that little bit of soreness the next day, right? You begin to enjoy your heart rate pumping, okay? And we can find that in mindfulness too. I mean, it's not like every day I go to sit at a cushion and I, have to climb this mountain. There's actually something very intrinsically pleasurable about taking a moment throughout my day, however long I decide to sit, and just be still and notice the world humming along without my responding. As a first responder, we feel, there's this responder feedback loop that happens in the mind. We train ourselves to respond from the moment we announce we want to be a first responder. We train ourselves to respond to influence our environment, right? For our community. And this is a good thing. But that responder feedback loop causes us to look for problems everywhere, real or imagined as first responders. And meditation can kind of show you that, can kind of teach you that you can just put everything down in the world and in the mind and just be free for moments, if not for minutes at a time. And there is something intrinsically pleasurable about that.
Hmm.
Now, why mindfulness is its own challenge? I've heard it said before that in prison, when we have prisoners that are acting poorly, what do we do with them? Right? We put them in solitary confinement. Okay. And this is considered to be one of the worst forms of torture, right? But if you were to put a Buddhist monk in that room behind those bars and that same concrete wall, he'd be fine for days. Now, the only difference between these two men is one has learned to discipline his mind, right? That's the only difference between these two men. And
So
if
about
that's
that.
at all interesting to you, then give mindfulness a try.
Mhm.
You might not get to the point where you can just sit for days and hours, but you will get to a point where you can sit in that doctor's office and just enjoy the act of waiting
Mhm.
without having to distract yourself with some video reel or some conversation. You can just simply be and find pleasure in that moment.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. That's a great visual when you put that together. Putting them in the hole, and then yeah, I can totally see that how that would be a huge benefit. So, for somebody who's listening right now, what kind of benefits would they get out of mindfulness? So they're looking at a mindfulness practice. What are they going to get being a first responder? How's that going to improve their life? Do you think?
um, well, if it's going to improve your life in any way, it's not going to be because you're a first responder or because you're you. It's because we all have this mind, okay, that wants to be open and wants to be find new experiences and wants to enjoy the life that it's been given. But it's been put on this software, on this hardware of the mind that's just totally alien, just totally monkey mind, right?
Mm.
Mindfulness will give you an ability to notice these two different dual processing in the mind. There's the part of you that wants to be sitting here and practice, and then there's the part of you that wants to be just jumping around the mind, getting up and doing whatever. you know that distinction allowed me to see the distinction in my career. Okay, think about your life as a first responder, whether you're a police officer or dispatcher, like me, a firefighter or a paramedic. you know, you tend to lead these two dual lives and we don't notice. But at the fire station, I tend to get hungry at different times. At home, I'd be gassed by 9 p.m. But at the fire station, I don't even think about sleep until 1 a.m., because a call is going to happen. We actually are different people, whether we're in our uniform or not. And if you pay close enough attention to the distinctions of your life there, mindfulness can also be a place where you can notice the distinctions of your mind and the distinctions of your emotional processing, the distinction between your goals and your habits, right? Mindfulness is just a place to go and study your own mental behavior in a way that can then allow you to live your life in a different way instead of succumbing to that monkey mind day in and day out.
I love it. So, how would somebody actually start that practice? Just sit down in a nice quiet area, no distractions, and just think or not think.
Yeah, well, it really is that simple. It
Mhm.
really is that
Mhm.
simple. To start a mindfulness practice, there's only one, maybe two tools that I tell you need to have. You need to have a little bit of patience, and you need to have your mind. Your mind is the one tool that you always have with you. It's the one thing we offer to our customers. It's the one thing you offer to your spouse. It's the one thing you offer to whatever goals that you want to achieve in your life. Your mind is always with you, and so it makes sense to want to sharpen it, right? In order to have a successful mindfulness practice, nobody needs to sit for an hour at a time or 2 hours at a time, right? We all have this vision that we got to just sit endlessly to have some achievement. And unfortunately, this dogmatism has limited the West's attempt in
Mhm.
accepting this basic human tradition. Okay. But all one must do is sit down, notice the mind as it begins to the way I try to describe to first responders is your mind will constantly falsely dispatch you, and you'll find yourself responding to these false dispatches in your mind. And all you need to do is cancel yourself en route, and come back to wherever you're focusing on, right? That's the practice. Now, there are ways we can get at it. There are different techniques we can practice. You can find all those different techniques all over YouTube. You can find different meditation instructors all over the place, right? But at Foundation Fortified, I hope to be able to blend a first responder's needs and stresses and lifestyle with mindfulness in a very unique way that can be accessible to all of us. I remember when I first considered mindfulness, and I didn't want to shave my head and always wear the color yellow. I wasn't interested in that.
Mhm.
but I found some tools. I found some. Eventually, was able to get through some of the war zone of mindfulness silliness, and I was able to find some good instructors online. And it isn't anything that needs to make somebody panic. That sense of going to the gym for the first time and not knowing where to start. I remember that as a young man. I remember that as a father, and I remember it as a young contemplative, right? There's no need to feel like there's anything stressful about the practice. You really can just go, sit down in a quiet place, and begin to just study how your mind operates. Having a guided session will help you do this in a better way. But just like you said, you really just need to sit down and focus on the mind.
Mhm.
It is that simple.
Are you down to do a little demo guided mindfulness with us?
Absolutely, no
Yeah,
problem at all.
I
Let's go
would
ahead and
love
do
it.
that.
Yeah, I love it.
We'll uh, we'll just start with a few minutes. Kind of give the listener a little bit of an idea what the goal is here. Um, I don't have any bells or anything, so I won't be using
Mhm.
any of those tools. But we can go and start by just finding a comfortable chair.
Mhm.
It's okay to sit on the floor, or you can sit in a chair. You can even have your back supported if necessary. And go ahead and just close your eyes and notice the weight of your body. Feel gravity pulling you into your seat. And open your awareness now to the sensations in the breath. You might feel them at the tip of the nose or in the chest, perhaps your belly. But just stay on scene of those sensations. Not responding to any false dispatches in the mind. Just pick one place there where you feel the breath most clearly and try to remain on scene through an inhalation, a brief pause, and your exhalation. Notice you have nothing to respond to here. There's no duty to act in any way. You can just rest and be still and notice this next breath. Bringing your awareness now back into your body, feeling the weight of your body. And finishing up with one patient inhalation and a relaxing exhalation. And go ahead and open your eyes. I don't know how long that was.
Don't know, but it felt amazing.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that's a little bit about my style there. So
Yeah,
that was
love it.
actually really helpful to give your listeners a little
Yeah.
bit of my style. And like I said, here in November, I'm hoping to shoot for November 1st. I'm going to be having a total full course for all first responders to go and discover. If
That's
you go
awesome.
onto my Facebook and my Instagram right now, you'll find some older meditations, some older lifestyles, things that I've done. Some of them are fairly recent. You can kind of go and tinker there, but go and mark your calendars if you're excited to get a mindfulness practice started. I'll be releasing a lot of content here very soon. So
Awesome. Awesome. Have you had much kind of resistance to bringing this to the first responder world, especially the fire service, but any first responder world? Have you had much resistance or pretty embracing?
I would say I've been pretty excited about it,
Yeah.
honestly.
Awesome.
I was nervous,
Mhm.
right? I've been a deep contemplative practitioner for 8 years now,
Mm.
right? And maybe three of my fellow firefighters knew about it. And
Mhm.
it's not that I was ashamed of it or anything. I just there's no need to talk about it, really.
Right.
Um, so within a few months after getting my injury at work,
Mhm.
all of a sudden Josh was now coming with this mindfulness practice and this new logo and all these weird words and weird seance sounding things. So there has been a little bit of like, what's he up to?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But for the most part, generally, people who don't know me on a personal level, right? Um, everyone's been real interested. Everyone's been really excited about this. I
Cool.
do feel like there's a hunger for mindfulness, for meditation out there for first responders. I think a lot of us are just tired of the therapy and medication train, and we're tired of self-soothing through alcohol or whatever else it is, right?
Yep.
Many of us would so much rather take the reins of our own physical health by dieting and exercise as first responders than giving the keys to a doctor in 20 or 30 years to keep us. And mindfulness is the same way, in my view. This is your mind, right? And you're going to be the one deploying it onto whatever scene the community is going to give you to handle. You should sharpen and strengthen your mind to be able to be more resilient to the things that you might see, be more compassionate toward the community that you serve,
Mhm.
be less responsive to life's daily shortcomings or frustrations. This is all very fruitful stuff for first responders.
Mhm.
I feel like there's a big hunger out there for it. I just don't think first responders have ever really been given the tools to know where to do mindfulness or how, or pick up a practice even. And I'm just excited to be able to blend all the training that we've had as first responders, whether you're a cop or a firefighter or a dispatcher or a paramedic. You have certain skills as a responder that lends itself very well to this practice. However, you have certain traumas and you have certain bad habits that don't lend themselves so well to the practice. And that's where I hope Foundation Fortified can help many first responders just discover this simple practice, devoid of all the religious dogmatism, separated from all the confusion, and just come here every day for about 10 minutes, pick up your practice.
Mhm.
That's kind
Mhm.
of what I'm hoping to do. So,
Beautiful. So, besides being an amazing tool for the mind, does it help the physical body in any way?
there is some research out there for it. Okay.
Mhm.
There's, so mindfulness is a common term. It's becoming more common. Okay. There have been 30 to 50 Westerner philosophers who have gone East tradition to discover mindfulness practice over the last 30 or 40 years, right? And what they've brought back are some ways of understanding meditation that can actually be studied scientifically.
Mm.
Okay. And so we have. They've studied people while practicing loving kindness meditation, while practicing breathing meditation, while practicing all kinds. And they've watched the mind from inside machines. And there's some interesting data there. And there is some interesting data about how the cardiovascular system can relax, your heart rate and your blood pressure can relax over time. You can get better sleep. You can do many things with this practice in the course of your health, right? In the same way that high blood pressure is the silent killer in the body, and anxiety is just the silent killer in the mind.
Mm.
Okay, I mean, what
Mm.
what do you think is causing your blood pressure? Okay, so there are things about mindfulness that secondhand help the body, but if I go to the gym to work out my muscles, I'm sure there's a benefit for my brain somewhere. I'm sure there's some research, but it really is secondhand to what I'm doing in the gym.
Right.
Whereas mindfulness, you really are sharpening the tools of your mind, and there are secondhand results for the physical body, sure, but
Mhm.
those are much less important for
Mhm.
those who are seeking the practice. Go to the gym for your body and come here for the mind.
Right.
So.
Love it. So the first responder who's listening right now, how could they incorporate this while they're on shift? Is there any options there or kind of strategies you'd suggest while they're on shift
Absolutely.
versus doing this at a nice
Absolutely.
quiet space at home, right? So,
For sure. So I've obviously done many mindfulness practices on duty. I try to do it at the same time every day. We all know how successful we can do anything the same time every day on at the station.
mhm,
Um, but I would seek my own practice, and I'd get distracted and disturbed all the time, and
mhm,
and that becomes its own form of practice after a while.
mhm,
Okay, to be constantly trying to go get your meditation practice in so that you could be this calm and open and more resilient individual, just to get pissed off because you got another call, just because you keep getting interrupted by
right.
trying to be this calm person, right? So that becomes its own practice at the station.
Mhm, mhm,
But in the beginning, I would definitely suggest, when you're trying to pick up a meditation practice and you're trying to understand mindfulness, you definitely want to start in a simple backdrop with limited noise and movement at first. While you're trying to build the habit and train your attention and understand your practice, it's very helpful to do these things kind of separated from the distractions of the outside world, because your mind will be distracted enough. Okay. But once you can tame the mind to a sufficient degree, it really doesn't matter where you meditate or where you be mindful,
mhm,
right? That is the goal, is to be able to be mindful in any given moment when you need to be. I've been mindful with you throughout this entire interview. I've had sensations of thirst come across me, and I have a coffee right behind the computer here that I could
mhm,
easily have grabbed, right?
mhm,
But mindfulness will give you another tool of ethical judgment. Here's this gentleman who's invited me on a show, and he wants to hear what I have to say, and hopefully his audience does. And I could impulsively show that cup or that thirst more of my attention
mhm,
than I could this gentleman.
mhm,
But instead, I'm going to just let that pass because it's not going to hurt me, and I'm just going to give my full attention to this interview because this is what's important to me right now, not the sensation of thirst.
mhm,
So that mindfulness is kind of a sidebar to what your question was, but when you first start mindfulness, you do want to start in a simple environment, but at some point, it really doesn't matter where you are. You can just choose to be mindful in any given moment. So,
mhm. I love that because when you talk about being present with somebody, especially in a conversation, such such gold comes out of that, right? You're actually going to be have way deeper conversations. You're
mm,
actually going to understand each other way differently than if you were thinking about grabbing that cup of coffee or
mm,
I got to do that mow the lawn tomorrow. If you're
mm.
present with somebody, oh man, what a game changer that is.
Well,
Um,
and that
yeah,
really is what it is,
yeah,
man. I mean,
yeah.
you have this one life. Despite what we believe about previous or future lives, I have my own views there. But despite what we all believe, we know we have this life. But even closer, right? You have today, right?
Mhm,
And if you're lucky, you have this moment is all you really have, because I don't know if they'll be later today. I just
mhm,
don't know.
mhm,
Back in 2019, we all had ideas of what we were going to be doing in 2020. Okay. And
mhm.
we were all wrong.
Yep.
We were all wrong. Now, that was a moment where collectively the world noticed we all have no idea what the hell's going on. I
Mhm,
mean, collected, like, the world is moving in a way that is producing more and more happiness. More and more people are escaping extreme poverty every year. More and more people are escaping childhood disease and escaping, famine and things like this. Year after year, decade after decade, the world continues to improve. But we feel as if it isn't in
mhm,
our own lived experience. We feel like it's unraveling all the time, right? Mindfulness can show you just how fickle your mind can make the world seem to you. There's, in principle, there's nothing threatening me right here in this moment. But believe you me, I have my worries. I have this knee. I got to be going back to 40 hours soon. I got to pick up my crew and figure out what I need to do. I still, my knee's still healing. I don't know my full capabilities. I got all these anxieties that I'm constantly. I got two boys. But in this moment, during this interview, I got no problems, man. You know what I mean? I got nothing to stress about. I got no anxiety here. The problems will come to me. And just as I've always done in my life, I'll find solutions,
mhm,
right? I will find the solutions when the problems come to me.
mhm.
So,
Love it. Love it. So what does Josh do other than mindfulness for your own wellness and well-being in general? Mental health, physical health, spiritual health. What else is in your toolbox?
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't say my marriage. Okay.
Yeah.
I've been married for quite some time. We got married young. We actually eloped to Vegas, so there is success in that in doing that path.
Yeah, good for you.
Um, but I spend a lot of time with my wife and kids. I have obviously close friendships. Having an important support network
Mhm.
is we hear that all the time as first responders, right? Well, believe you me, as somebody who has successfully stressed his support network through this knee injury over the last 8 months of my life, having a support network is better than having the world's best mindfulness practice, right?
Mhm.
We really are the sum of others, not yourself. We really do not rely on ourselves in the way we think we. I mean, think about your average everyday life, right? There are thousands of people you and I rely on every day just to make things happen. The water department, right? The education, the police, fire, right? We rely on so many people,
Mhm.
but we feel as if we have to do it all ourselves. So I'd say I have a strong support network. I have a fairly, I enjoy the gym. I enjoy going to the gym and exercising. I try to lift 4 or 5 times a week. I enjoy several other hobbies other than those. Me and my boys try to go camping. We try to do certain things together. But for the most part, mindfulness, a robust exercise routine, and just well developed relationships. Man,
Go.
I feel like so many of us lack a basic sense of well rounded relationships in our lives.
Mhm.
But let's be honest. If we're honest about the screen time notifications on our phones every Saturday or Sunday, how good can your relationships be when you're looking at your phone 3 or 4 hours a day? I mean,
Mhm.
just wrestle with that for a second, right? Here's your screen time notification on a Saturday morning. No one else sees it but you. You average 3 hours and four whatever minutes, like a day, right? And we're still somehow keeping up with our
Mhm.
Netflix shows, and we're still
Mhm.
somehow keeping up with our emails. It's like, what are we? How are we living our lives at this point?
Yeah, so true.
It really might. If you want to practice mindfulness without even going to Foundation Fortified, I would suggest just putting your phone in your room about 5 o'clock for 1 month, for an
Mhm.
entire month. Just put your phone in your room at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and don't look at it till morning. And see if by day 22, a new world doesn't begin to open up to you. It seems a little less chaotic, a little
Mhm.
more patient, and maybe a little more joyful and simple, right? There's a mindfulness practice you don't even need to close your eyes for. You just let the world open up to you in a way that it used to be before devices were on our phones all the time.
Mm. Love it. Beautiful. Beautiful. What else does Josh need in your life to thrive, to get to that next level? What does Josh need in his life?
Man, nothing.
Oh, good. Awesome.
Nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I
Good.
mean? Look, I would love if Foundation Fortified was successful. I would
Mhm.
love if many first responders found value in what I'm doing out there in the world.
Mhm.
That would be great. I would love to fully get back to my career and be the fire captain I was before without limping and struggling to move. Right. Um, I would love to someday be a grandfather.
Mhm.
I would love to see my kids graduate college. There are so many things that I want to happen, but I just want those things to happen.
Mhm.
They might come to pass and they might not. But I would be a lunatic if I expected all of those things to happen in the same time and in the same way I'm expecting them to.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, really,
It's a good way to look at
there
life.
are things I want. Yeah, there are things I want to achieve, but,
Mhm.
you know, just moment to moment, just trying to enjoy what you do have and focus less on what you don't.
Yeah.
So,
Being present. Being present. So going back to Foundation Fortified, where did that name come from? It
you
sounds
know,
interesting story behind there. I'm thinking.
it just came out of the ether, man.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Firefighter, I've always kind of been an alliteration junkie, right?
Mhm.
I dare say that you were probably a writer at some point. This is why I probably led your podcast. I've
Yep.
always kind of been a little bit of a writer.
Yep.
Always
Definitely.
enjoyed alliteration. And with the two F's in firefighter, I was trying to figure out how, and it really is, mindful. Your mind really is your foundation, right? And what you're trying to do in mindfulness meditation is fortify it.
Mm.
So it just felt foundation fortified, right? Just
Yep.
felt good. And I remember I was playing with the F's, trying to figure out a logo or whatever, and I just turned one of the F's around, and I was like, "That's it, we're done
All right.
here." We're done.
Nice.
So it was funny, but yeah, the name just kind of came to me. It
Cool.
seemed to work. It seemed to feel good. So that was it.
Awesome. Awesome. So before we wrap up, I want to hear what you think your wife, your kids, or some of your close station firefighters would say about Josh since his development of mindfulness. Anything they've noticed or you've heard them say, "Wow, Josh, you since you've been doing this, you are." Anything there?
I would definitely say that since I've been home focused on becoming a mindfulness instructor and really diving in, it's hard to say that my own practice hasn't benefited from just that focus too,
Mm.
right? Prior to being able to fully dive in over the last few months to bring this thing forward, and I was just doing my own 10 to 30-minute mindfulness sessions a day, you know, my wife would definitely see the benefit. She would know when I was sitting and when I was. There's no way to even try to lie to her about whether or not I was doing my mindfulness practice, right?
Mm.
If I wasn't sitting down mindfully for X amount of minutes every couple of days, my wife could tell I'd begin to get a little stressed
Mm.
out. All of a sudden the kids couldn't get above a certain noise without hearing from me. I'd be a little bit less patient with my customers on scene of calls. I'd be a little bit more intense with the current problem rather than finding a solution, right? Um, there's a lot of ways in which my mindfulness practice can help keep me fine grained and a little bit less, reactive to the outside world. But mindfulness, the skill of mindfulness, hopefully that's what you can, once you discover it and have sharpened it to a certain degree, that's really one of the best skills that you can have. I mean, it really is a superpower in the world to be able to have something happen in your experience that's just flagrantly unacceptable and to be able to respond to it with pretty, with some poise and not look how the rest of the people might look if that were happening, right? Now, I cannot say that through my injury, I've always been the best practitioner of the mind, right? I went from being this guy who was able to squat the entire gym and I was a fire captain and I was cleaning carpet in my dad's business on the side and I was playing basketball with my kid and I had all these identities, right?
Mm.
And then I snapped my knee and one by one the identities just faded. I was no longer a firefighter. I wasn't going to the station. I was no longer cleaning carpet. I was no longer playing basketball with my kids.
Mm.
Can't go to the gym, right? And this went on for months. So what are you? If you can't put on those cloaks for 3-4 hours a day like you typically do, what are you for these 20 hours of what are you doing with your time when your identity's just been totally deconstructed for you through one simple injury, right? Now, the hope is that the identity will come back once I'm healed. But if you pay attention to your moment to moment experience, you realize that all those identities are gone now,
Mm.
and now I'm just this. I'm injured.
Mhm.
What can I do with my experience now? I can't lift, so I can be frustrated about that. I can't go to the station. I can be angry about that. I can resist this change to my life, or I can just figure out the best way to respond going forward.
Yep.
So,
Best way to look at it. So moving forward, is there
Mhm.
any questions that you wish I asked you that I did not ask you? Was there anything that's in your mind going, why didn't Arjuna ask me this?
no, I
No.
I, I think so far I've had all the time in the world to
Cool.
be able to explain my situation to you,
Cool.
and you've been great. Yeah.
Awesome. Is there one last thing you want to share with our listeners that you would feel remiss to leave out of our conversation today?
Um, I just want to, if I was going to say anything to any first responders, being a first responder, there's a new form of suffering that first responders have invented for humanity. Okay. In normal human affairs, right? As we were hunters and gatherers or farmers or whatever humanity was doing at the time, right? You typically responded to only your problems and your neighbor's problems, right? And you would help each other in that way. And you would be able to grapple with whatever happened. Let's say let's say there was a fire in the hut next to you, right? And a family was lost. You could grieve with that community and help rebuild that process and go through the normal affairs of human suffering and repair. But first responders have this new form of suffering that's only beginning to come into view in a way. We respond to this outside world that is somewhat familiar to us. It's our community. But we don't know this individual, hopefully, right? We don't know the individual we're running on. But we know the spot, and we know the people that gather there, and we go there later, and we're with that suffering in a way. And the other people there don't know what's happened inside that building. And what's worse, we don't know the full range of what happened to that problem. Maybe we transport the person to the hospital and we find out if they healed or not. Or maybe we arrested that individual, but we never get to see how the family responds to getting that guy out of that situation.
Yep.
So we're always left with this hollowed out view. And it makes us feel like our community is full of gaps and holes and problems, right? That becomes a problem over time for you. You begin to feel like your community and the entire world is just a problem, right? That kind of suffering really builds up over time and creates the burnout, creates the stress, creates the frustration with the world that you have as a first responder. But we needn't suffer in this way. We don't need questions. Any question to a situation, like, why did this family get in this car accident, right? How did this family get in a car accident? Where is the family now? All these questions are fairly vacuous when it comes to the actual question of suffering. Suffering is going to happen in the world. And we as responders know this. And our only duty is to go out in the world and try to limit the harm for when this predictable suffering occurs. And I think us as first responders, we see it backwards. We go to these incidences and we take on the full range of their problem because, we have empathy. We have our own hardwired empathy that we feel for these people. But it's in that empathy that so much of our suffering occurs. We need to fall back and see our roles differently. We know as humans, suffering and problems are going to happen in modern society. And your only goal is to try to defend and limit that suffering when it occurs within your community. And I think that little shift in your mindset and how you do your job can help prevent you from taking on the empathy of the suffering that you're going to see. Does that make sense in any way?
100%. I can relate to that 100% as well. Like myself going through that, and a lot of people I coach, compassion fatigue and just, moral injury and all these different things that are stacking up because of the lens that they're seeing the world through. Right. So, which I did myself, unfortunately. So I was in that boat, but honestly, I didn't have the resources, the knowledge, the tools that are out there today. Right. So, I left the fire service in 2021. So I'm still very involved in the fire service, maybe even more than I was before.
How many years did you do?
24
24 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, congratulations, sir. Congratulations.
Thank you. And so that was, leading up to that, I didn't have those tools. Mindfulness was just starting to kind of poke its head up, but really nobody was teaching it. There was no resources out there. You just heard about meditation, mindfulness, all these other little things. But yeah, as time's gone on in the last few years, it's really elevated the access to that resource, right? So people can have that shift.
A direct result of that.
Yeah, 100%. Love it, Josh. Love it. How can people learn more about you? You kind of briefly mentioned the website before, but email, social media, how can people access
they can email me if they want with questions at foundationfortified@gmail.com. Okay. We have a website, foundationfortified.org. Like I said, you go on there right now, it's kind of a landing page for our Facebook, our socials, right? But pretty soon here, it's going to become its own page with its own content. Okay. But you can definitely go experiment. I'm always looking for more likes and stuff, obviously, like we all are on social media, but you can definitely go on and check out some of my past content and see what that's all about. But the name is Foundation Fortified. If you type it into anything besides TikTok, I don't have a TikTok, you should be able to find it. So
awesome. Is there written content out there you'd suggest people looking into? Anything out there you'd recommend?
There are some books that I've read. Unfortunately, any book that I would offer your listener probably wouldn't be a mindfulness book.
Mm.
But if I was going to suggest any book to anybody to read, I would suggest the book *Sapiens* by Yuval Noah Harari. Okay,
Yeah, good one.
I just couldn't put this book down from the moment I picked it up. His ideas within that book about the long arc of human history are very profound, right? And it didn't come to any surprise to me that he meditates 2 hours a day and he constantly seeks mindfulness retreats. I think some of the ideas in that book and the way he sees humanity's journey throughout time are definitely influenced by his connection to his mindfulness practice. So I would definitely suggest that book, *Sapiens*.
Yeah, definitely a good one. He's got a second one out too. I forget the name of it.
Yeah, *Homo Deus*, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
*Homo Deus*.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, I just got recently back from Reno and did a 3-hour breath workshop. And that was mindfulness to a whole nother degree.
I bet you there's some intense moments.
There was intense moments. It was a life changer. I definitely want to investigate that for myself a little deeper, for sure.
Yeah, one of the more challenging mindfulness practices I ever went to early on was a 1-hour sit, with the only goal was just to not move for an hour. Now, I could voluntarily diminish my suffering at any moment in that 60-minute process by just moving a finger or adjusting the. But the amount of suffering you can impose on yourself by just not allowing yourself to move is really illuminating. And I'm sure box breathing for 3-hour session like that was definitely had some of those principles for you, didn't it?
Well, it was the first time I do a lot of diaphragmatic breaths, so a lot of belly breathing. And this is the first time that I've actually hyperventilated for 45 minutes straight.
Yeah, oh man, concentrated effort. Yeah.
Very good. And about 15, 20 minutes into it, I was working. I'm like, this is hard work. And then all of a sudden a light or a switch just went and it just did it itself. Like I didn't have to breathe anymore. It was the
very
flow
cool.
was happening by itself. It was
very cool.
pretty incredible. Cool. Well, Josh, it's been a true honor. Thank you very much for sharing your wisdom, and all the best to Foundations Fortified and the reach that it can have for the fire service and beyond. So kudos to you and the work, and much appreciated.
Thank your listeners obviously for listening to this podcast, and if you ever want to have me back on and to have another discussion later on, please feel free to invite me on. So
awesome. All right, everyone. Hopefully you got as inspired as I did about some mindfulness. Like I said before, I dabble in it, and I tend to use it more when I'm feeling anxious. In that moment is where, I need to take a moment, need to be present. But after talking to Josh today, I think it's truly something that I want to just include in my routine on a daily basis. So thanks for the inspiration there, Josh. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Until next time, stay well.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.